Much of Iran's retaliation for the U.S.-Israeli offensive has focused on American allies in the Gulf, as you heard there, that have housed U.S. troops for years. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Al Jazeera the U.S. will continue to support allies in the region.
If you think about what they've struck in the region, what has Iran gone after? It's been energy infrastructure against countries that were not waging war against them, but yet they went after these countries nonetheless. This is why they built these missiles and drones in the first place. But they've also attacked embassies, diplomatic facilities, which is unheard of. They've attacked airports, which is unheard of. This is what they've done. And this is a weakened Iran. This is an Iran that's weaker than it's been in 10 years. Imagine 5 years from now or 3 years from now, when they had more missiles, more drones, what they would have been willing to do to their neighbors and to us. That was intolerable. That's why this needed to be done now. The United States is committed to finishing the job. We're working very closely with all of our allies, work very closely in defensive. Yes, unfortunately, drones and missiles get through from time to time, but the overwhelming majority of these launches are defeated. They're shot down before they reach their intended target, or the destruction would be far worse. These are strong, stable countries in the region. These are our allies. These are our friends, and we are going to continue to be there and support them as they face this onslaught.
Let's discuss this and all the latest developments in the war with Zeidon Al-Kinani, who's the founding director of the Arab Perspectives Institute. Good to have you with us on Al Jazeera, Zeidon. So Rubio's told Al Jazeera there that the U.S. will continue to support its allies in the region. But at the same time, the White House has suggested that President Trump will ask Arab countries to cover the costs of the war against Iran, which is estimated to be in the billions. How likely are these countries that have been under attack to respond to this request by President Trump if he was to make it?
Well, it's up to these countries officially to make a response accordingly. But if we were to analyze Trump's objective or willingness at this stage to request this from the GCC states, this would have made sense if it was those GCC states that advocated for this war to happen. But they actually advocated for the war not to happen in the lead up to the war. They continued to call for diplomacy and de-escalation. The country that seems to be worthy to take and handle the costs would be Israel. The Israeli government, the Netanyahu's administration, is the party and the agency that has convinced and pushed the United States to take this war on and take the front seat towards an Iranian regime change, to the extent that even U.S. politicians and U.S. political discourse across U.S. media outlets have publicly and openly claimed that the Trump administration has conducted this war in a very Israel-centric policy, interest-oriented way, ignoring the consequences this may lead to their very own long-standing allies in the region.
Yeah, as we heard from Zain there, some of these countries in the Gulf now, Qatar notably, are calling for diplomacy. But how unified are Gulf leaders right now in their stance against Iran?
They're unified on some aspects and obviously have their share of differences in many other aspects. One cannot deny that we're noticing two significant camps between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, despite their very own different approaches towards it to some extent, and the camp between Oman and Qatar, which prefers diplomacy versus the potential suggestion of a deterrence if Iran were to continue its attacks against the GCC. One cannot deny that this has also paused many of the differences that did exist amongst some of these GCC countries, particularly and most notably recently between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which may lead to serious conversations and trying to establish and mature some form of institutionalized GCC economic and political shield that may protect them in the future from such political developments. One cannot deny that the current conflict between Iran and Israel, if we were to remove the US from the picture, is a very strong reflection of who are the regional power players with strong expansionist ambitions in the region. Unifying these countries under one institutional umbrella may allow them to reconsider security paradigms that will protect them in the future.
We're seeing more Iranian activity in the Strait of Hormuz. And there have been some very mixed messaging from the U.S. on what they want to do with the Strait of Hormuz. We've heard Marco Rubio tell us that the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened one way or another. But at the same time, President Trump, I think yesterday, saying that we don't need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to end the war. What does this mixed messaging and the mixed signals from the Americans tell us about the current phase of the war, and how do you interpret all of these different messages?
The only way to interpret these messages is that the transformation of this rhetoric is heavily relied upon the political development on the ground. There was a clear confidence and trust from day one that they require a complete surrender based on the rationale and the belief that the assassination of the supreme leader would be enough to eliminate the political system and the regime in Iran. Given that there has been a clear evidence that this war is to be continued, given that a plan B or even a plan C or the preparation of the US-Israeli war towards Iran was not enough to conduct such a regime change in a multivariate institutional political system such as Iran. And that's why we're noticing a transition from a complete surrender to potentially recognizing an Iranian regime change within the same political elite and indicating that there are positive talks going on. The Strait of Hormuz is a point that is an outcome of this war. Even that, we're noticing a change in the rhetoric from completely not allowing Iran to have a say over it to potentially accepting a way out of it.
And Zeidon, of course, we cannot lose sight of what's happening in Lebanon. Israel's invasion of Lebanon is rapidly widening and could perhaps outlast the war in Iran, some have said. What is the widening of the Israeli offensive in Lebanon? It's pushing deeper into southern Lebanon. What does it tell you about Israel's evolving military and strategic calculus here?
Well, it reflects Israel's overarching political interest here in trying to meet its greater Israel trajectory, which doesn't heavily rely on the proclaims of trying to conduct an Iranian regime change for the sake of democratization, whether it's within Iran or the beyond region. This is also perhaps why we're noticing strong engagement from regional actors such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt, giving their close proximity geographically to such a Israeli vision in the future. It is also a very alarming signal towards the lack of international institutions and the lack of international community's ability in standing up to a regional hegemon that is violating the internationally recognized sovereignty of a country like Lebanon today.
Thank you so much. Always good to get your insights. Zeidon Al-Kinani, thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you.